All right, if Republican legislators in Arizona have their way, there will be an HCR 2060, which gives the opportunity for Arizona voters to enhance the ability for state and local law enforcement to enforce immigration laws and have a stronger presence when it comes to enforcement of people in the country illegally committing criminal acts, that we don't have to rely on federal enforcement, much like what's happening in Texas. And I believe this piece of legislation is contingent on the Texas law passing constitutional muster. It's being challenged right now by the federal government in the courts. Joining us to talk about this now once again is Senate President Warren Petersen. Senator, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Did I describe HR 2060 pretty well?
Yeah, I think you described it very well. It's conditional, so it will say that it's subject to the SB 4 being held as constitutional. One question I get a lot from people, and so I can put this out right now, is they say, well, what's the difference between this and SB 1070? One of the key differences between the two issues is that this really is a border bill, okay? If you look at it, it's all about if law enforcement basically witnesses somebody crossing illegally, or this is close to the border, and there's very clear evidence that they've come in illegally, which is a violation of federal law. We're basically just mirroring federal law. This shouldn't be controversial. Uphold the law. I think upholding the law is, most people agree you should uphold the law, and that's a good thing to do. So the key difference between that, SB 1070 was more of, it was really like you could be in northern Arizona, you could be anywhere in the state, and it was, a more of an intrusive thing. This is like clear evidence. This truly is to handle the border, crisis and the obvious somebody obviously illegally crossing into this country. That's what this will deal with.
And I know, just to touch on the SB 1070 thing, because I remember that happening, that still passed by a very big majority in Arizona.
Yeah, it did. It did pass, but I do get a lot of people saying, "Well, what are some of the key differences between the two things?" And I think that's the key. And also, I think that addresses with you have people back with SB 1070 saying it was trying to say racial or racist or whatever. This is clearly not racist. This is at the border, very obvious. It does not. It's just probable cause at the border. Is somebody here? Did somebody cross illegally?
Would it allow for the Arizona courts to prosecute and then the state of Arizona to deport?
So, I mean, essentially it does. It has the adjudication process. So you do go through court, and if they go through court, the first time it's a Class 1 misdemeanor, and then they're not eligible for probation for 30 days. The court will issue an order to return them to their foreign nation. And so what would happen at that point is basically law enforcement takes them to the border, and you can cross. You can go back into Mexico. There's another component to this law, I think, that's really important that we're putting forward, and that is the fentanyl crisis. Fentanyl is pouring through the border. It's mainly coming across the border, and so we're adding something to this that if somebody sells fentanyl or gives you fentanyl, then it's a and you end up dying, it's a felony murder.
When you look, and the fentanyl crisis we know has gotten so severe, even the superintendent of public instruction, Tom Horn, is now doing more enforcement and more awareness in schools. And it's a pretty scary proposition when it's gotten so serious that you need to step up enforcement and awareness in our public school system.
Yeah, 100%. I think, everybody is starting to know somebody that this has happened to. And this is not just like any drug. I mean, it literally it is so lethal, it can touch your skin and you can die from just, exposure to your skin.
Arizona Senate President Warren Petersen is joining us. So I am myself not a big fan normally of the propositional form of government we have, where voters can get signatures, or the legislature send it to the ballot. But how similar is this to the piece of legislation that passed that the governor vetoed? And why send it to the voters? Do you believe the voters want it in spite of the governor's veto?
Yeah, Mike, I'm with you. I believe in a Republican form of government, which is, representative form of government. Your legislators should be putting forward the laws. The process allows for better laws that way. We have sent these propositions to her desk over and over again for the last 2 years. And she's speaking out of both sides of her mouth. She is saying the federal government is failing us, the border is not secure. She'll say that, but then when we put the legislation on her desk, she vetoes it. She hasn't proposed any border legislation. So it's just she's trying to have it both ways. She's vetoed everything we've put there, and we've said from the beginning, if she vetoes our stuff, we will give it to the voters, so the voters can decide.
Have you talked with public safety, law enforcement officials? Are they in favor of this? Do they think it's going to put more work on them that they don't want? What has been the response from law enforcement at the state level and the local level in border communities?
Yeah, no, we are communicating with them. We're going to have a press conference today. Law enforcement will be there. Law enforcement is, or at least the ones we're talking to, they are supportive of this, and they're grateful that they're going to have this tool now because the federal government is obviously failing to implement the law. Now, if they need more resources, we fund law enforcement. We fund law enforcement well, and that's top priority of government. If they're going to need more resources, then that's something that we will support.
When in looking at how this is going to play out, if it is passed and if it stands constitutional muster, how quickly will it be implemented? Is there going to be a cost associated with this? Is there some kind of a look at the costs?
The cost is not. The cost has been that this hasn't been enforced. We've seen a huge strain on public resources. We've seen a huge increase in crime. And I think one reason why there's so much outrage is because for the first time, this really isn't – it's not Mexico. It's not Mexicans going into our country. It is, 100 – I think they want to say it was 100 plus nations that have been pouring through our southern border. And so, no, the cost is if we do nothing, the damage and from the crime, the trafficking, everything, that has been the real expense. And that's the trade-off. That's why we fund public safety. The trade-off is, government pays for this, but the citizens are safe in their persons and their property.
Last question is about amendments. I know that there are some proposed amendments to this. What will it look like? What do you think this final bill will look like, or the HCR will look like, that the voters will vote on? Will there be major amendments that will be passed?
I think possibly. I mean, I think you're going to see in committee in the next couple of days here. I think what goes through the committee will be, pretty much what goes forward. It is possible. I mean, this happens a lot in the legislative process. It is possible that the House or other members, after it goes through the committee, will want a floor amendment. But I really do feel like we have been talking. We've been working on this for a few weeks. And you mentioned it's not good to go on the ballot. It's not, but at least this is going through the process. I mean, it is being deliberated, it is being discussed, it is being amended, whereas you'll see stuff that gets drafted and then signatures collected. That's a lot of times where you'll get a lot of unintended consequences.
Yeah, and that's the part of it, that process, because then what it becomes who can get the most money and run the shiniest campaign many times. And the big issue for me is the way it alters the Constitution, that then if it's figured out by people that it's not as good or it's not like we thought it was going to be, it takes a huge undertaking in the legislature to make any changes to it.
100%. So, yeah, I think Republican form of government best, referrals second best, and then initiatives are an absolute disaster. And Arizona is we have the most stringent initiative process, meaning it's the hardest to be changed, and it's in the whole nation. And so you'll have billionaires that get to play legislator with their money, and tons of out-of-state money, Arizona is used kind of as the guinea pig for the rest of the nation because it's so easy for these organizations with a lot of money to just come in and write and pass laws in Arizona because of the way the process is.
Well, listen, I always appreciate your time on the show. I know the listeners are compelled by this. I know it's a big issue in Arizona, always has been, and I'm anxious to see what it looks like if it gets on the ballot, when it gets on the ballot in November, and how the voters in Arizona, what they do with it. So thanks again for the time today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mike. Take care.
All right, that is the Senate President Warren Petersen joining us for a few moments.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch and listen to the new season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.